Hello again, we're back. Here is an explanation of the common ambience processing that we looked at in class. It's slightly more of a conceptual idea that will help you to uh, convince your listener that there is a sense of depth to the things that you have placed in your mix. It plays into the psychoacoustic properties of energy delivery that we've discussed previously, but really what it's doing, it's playing into the way that your brain or everyone's brain processes how far something is away. And obviously a visual thing isn't possible in audio, but you can play into the other things. And one of those is an understanding of pre-delay. We've spoken about the basics of pre-delay in a video before, so a little bit of an understanding of that is required. Maybe you should watch that video beforehand. It's just a few minutes long, so it shouldn't hurt. But this is a specific technique that allows you to not only create a sense of depth in mix, which is the sort of secondary stage of this, but also tie things together, give them a sense of commonality, some sort of link to each other. So these files that I've loaded into the system here,
Such a cost.
this particular song has been produced with different reverbs on different things. So if you listen, the drums have got, in fact, I don't think there's any drums there. Let's move this on to here.
Lullabies, look in your eyes.
You can hear there's an awful lot of reverb on the drums already. There's reverb on a different reverb on the piano, and already
I've been first and last.
production reverb and delay choices placed on the vocal. We're not trying to redesign these. The problem that this has as a thing is that with all those different types of reverb characteristics, they are not combining these things and making them sound like they belong together. If you place all of these things in a room or place them in a space that is the same, our brains will read that as they belong together more. And this plays into that process that we're really adept at cancelling room reverberation in our brains. So I think rather than getting too deep in explanation now, I'm just going to demonstrate this, and I'll explain as I go. So the process is I'm going to add a send on all of the channels to the same space, and I'm going to call this, so it's one bus for all. I'm going to make it pre-delay, pre-fader. And that means that it's sent. It means that I can mute it and I isolate the reverb and listen to it on its own. I'm also going to hold down Option and click the dial here. That sends an equal amount of everything. We'll come back to the levels shortly. So over here, auxiliary 2, this is the common which is common ambience, right? And on the common ambience channel, I'm going to add a reverb. Let's go straight to chroma reverb once again, right? And in this, right, the thing that I want to recreate with this reverb is this isn't about adding a new long, lush reverb for creative purposes. This is a functional reverb. I want this to sound as if I'm sitting listening to the song coming through a PA in a hall, as if I were at sound check and stood at the back of the room and I can just listening to them playing something out of the PA. So when I press play, that's the image that I'm going to try and design into this sound. So that sounds a bit too echoey. So I'm going to turn the density and the size down a bit just to make it a smaller room, to make my brain, or to make it easier for my brain to cancel it. This is the thing. Maybe I've just jumped over that, but just for those that haven't heard me say this before, that we spend most of our lives in rooms, and because we spend most of our lives in rooms, our brains treat the reverberant qualities of those rooms with a little disdain, and it cancels it. It regards it as less important information, so that your brain will cancel the room reverb. This is the trick that we're using that process that the brain's capable of doing in order to make the listener believe that all of these tracks belong together in a space. So I'm designing the space that they're in right now. Now, if I you know, shut my eyes and just imagine for a second. It's easy to think of that as being played out of a PA in the room. And now the idea is that this is way too loud, obviously. Drop the fader right down, unsolo it, play back the track.
Lullabies, look in your eyes.
And now when I blend this in, I'll start to hear the reverb.
Doesn't mean that
At the point at which I can hear the reverb, it's too much. I want to drop that down. And as I pull that back slowly, my brain will just start to shut it off before it's actually disappeared.
lullabies, look in
It's
your
too loud right now.
running round the same old town. Doesn't mean that much to me.
I don't hear the reverberant qualities of this reverb anymore. I'm just hearing the reverb that they applied. Now, this is the trick. Right now, my brain is just ignoring this new reverb, but it's still making all those tracks seem more cohesive because they all have a similar fingerprint added, a similar touch of this reverb added to every single element of them. And that helps your brain connect the things and make them seem like they belong together. So when I turn this off and on again whilst it's playing, you just get a greater sense of cohesiveness, like things belong together.
Lullabies, look in your eyes. Running round the same old town. Doesn't mean that much to me.
I need even less of it than I thought.
I've been first and last. Look at how the time goes past. But
See there, I'm not really hearing the reverb. I'm just hearing its cohesive qualities. And that's the principle of this trick, that by putting all of these things into the same space, my brain just thinks that they make more sense together. That's because they do. They're all having this common touch. They're all melded together in this reverb. Now, we can take this one step further with some pre-delay process. And this is where we're going to play a little trick, because I can't, if I add a pre-delay here to the entire reverb, that puts the whole thing, all of these signals, all of these elements at the same distance back. So at the moment, they're sitting in at a similar distance, okay, in the perspective that my brain can understand. If I want some things to come forward, as I explained in the other video and in class, that pre-delay is the thing that does that. So I can't do it to all of them. So what I want to do is create an independent pre-delay for specific tracks, the vocal being one of those. So what I do is I turn off this bus. So I'm going to make that no send. So now the vocal isn't sending to the reverb yet. I'm going to send it on a little detour. I'm going to send it to bus 2 and call bus 2 pre-delay. Now, what I'm attempting to do here is take the pre-delay from inside of this reverb and put it on its own out here. So what I can do is I can add a very short delay, and in Logic, the sample delay is the shortest, but you're looking for something that runs really short delays. So if we look at the sample delay, I want to link left and right together, set it to milliseconds. It needs to be in that same pre-delay range that we looked at earlier on, in that 50 to 60 millisecond sort of space. That will separate the vocal from the reverb. Now, well, it will add a pre-delay. No, I think the best way to explain this first is to finish this off. So this pre-delay channel, where I've added the delay, this does not want to go to our master output, okay? This wants to go directly into my common ambience. I'm just creating an independent pre-delay to feed into this channel. So that's bus 1. That's going to bus 1. So I set the output here to bus 1. Now I don't hear this delay going directly to my outputs. I won't. It's only going into the reverb. So what I've effectively done is put an independent pre-delay it doesn't have any effect on anything other than the things I send to it. Now, so here, when I, 1 second, I just realized I haven't set this to my music bus. So what I can do now, solo this common ambience again. There's no vocal. only the backing vocal. Turn this up. Okay, and I can hear the vocal in there now, but the vocal is delayed slightly, and my brain calculates that as it is nearer than the other things that aren't delayed, because they are receiving, because we're receiving the information and the reverb, or the source material and the reverb, at similar times. If there is a delay, it makes your brain think that the source material is closer, right? So when we hear this now,
Lullabies, look in your eyes.
I can push that common ambience a bit more, and it takes the music, or it takes everything else other than the vocal, further into the background. All right, and that's how that process works. We're just creating a sense of foreground by going via our pre-delay, and background by going direct to the reverb. I think it's easier if you think of this. If I put this in place, if I put this pre-delay here, then that moves that head of. I'm also going to move the other one there too into place. Let's just move that so it makes a little more sense when you look at it. There we go. Before it goes to this music bus. Okay, so this is now vocal feeding a pre-delay before it goes to the common ambience. Everything else is going direct to the common ambience. Now, that's not the only thing you can do. If I want things to be less reverberant, so for example, if I want the guitars to feel closer, I can create its own pre-delay with slightly less pre-delay, or I could just turn those down in the reverb slightly. And I still want to keep a bit of the reverberant information on there, but if it's not quite as strong, they won't seem as distant.
Lullabies, look in your eyes. Running round the same old town doesn't mean that much to me.
It just adds a sense of completion to the whole thing. It makes it feel as if it belongs in the space. It's very subtle, I grant you that. But trust me, it really works. It's one of those stages that brings everything together. And although it's really subtle right now, when we move on with the mix procedure and we start to look at bus compression and limiting and even mastering, these things exaggerate these small differences and make such an impact on the effectiveness of your mix. Now, I hope that's not too confusing. It is a fairly conceptual idea, but it does really work. So it's just by separating, by taking the pre-delay out of the reverb plugin and creating its own space here. This is just a pre-delay feed for this reverb. By doing that, I can be selective about what gets pre-delayed, and whatever gets pre-delayed comes closer to me in the mix. Okay, they're the simple principles. I hope that hasn't fried your brain. Don't worry if not. We can go over it again in detail at another time. But anyway, enjoy that procedure. Try it on your own material. It works even better actually on dry material because you can be even more subtle. I think the key to the reverb is to make it a recognizable sounding reverb. Rooms are the most easy reverb for our brain to ignore because we spend so much time in rooms. All right, that's it. I'm done. I need to stop talking. Take care.